biggest things are those barrels and the cones coming in at the same time. That's the one where people start to get a little bit hinky out there on the roads.
Yeah.
Ron, do you have an opinion?
Yeah, and regardless if they're out there actually, performing road work or utility work or sidewalk pouring curb and gutter, you still have a change in the original traffic, like what we're experiencing on E Street. So obviously in the evenings and Saturdays and Sundays, they still got materials mowed or staged as well as equipment.
Or you've got half of a lane,
Yeah.
and the other half isn't there.
Yeah, yeah. Still got relief opportunities for pedestrians to access businesses as well as vehicles, so.
You get temporary driveways, people negotiating those.
I guess one of the problems that I would have with some of these different versions is that I think there's a little bit of a backlash among some people in the JQ public regarding if there's no construction, why are the fines doubled, in an empty construction zone? And I understand that. And I understand a lot of the reasonings that we've heard here. The thing that comes to my mind is if there's really truly nobody in jeopardy and the person does something stupid, the speed limit still is the speed limit, which is the reduced speed limit, which is what we're authorizing with this chapter, among other things, right? I mean, so the difference that we're really discussing is not the speed limit itself, but the fine. And the problem I find with this is that I think it's a little presumptuous for us to make this assumption that simply doubling it is the only way we can get people to actually lower their speed limit or their speed that they're traveling. In other words, if the speed limit's reduced in a construction zone, it's going to be reduced whether there are people working there or not. We're not going to take away those speed. I mean, as long as the roadway is, a little bit different than optimal, the speed limit's going to be reduced, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Potentially.
It could be what we're looking at with new municipal code is creating a construction zone. Right. If the contractor wanted to reduce the speed, they could submit to the Public Works Department based on location of where the project's at, close proximity to schools or high trip, average daily trip type businesses. But we don't have that specifically in the code right now in a construction zone. They could do temporary with pop-up signs, holdouts.
But right now, the speed limit on E Street is still 30 miles an hour, is it not? Even though you can't physically do it without taking out some of the flaggers they've got out there.
Yeah.
With this new authority, we may, on the advice of our city engineer, lower that speed limit as for the duration of the construction zone. What you're saying is if workers pull off every night, should the fines still be doubled because the workers aren't present? I think the staff recommendation is that there's enough, that the purpose of that reduced and the incentive to be compliant isn't a function of the presence of workers necessarily. It's a function of three things, and one of which is the presence of workers.
We have had this discussion before, but the school zones, when there's no children, it says when children are present. And so aren't we kind of doing the same thing here? We can make it a construction zone, but the fines double if there's a child present versus...
Well, I think the difference with a school zone, in a school zone, the only issue that you're dealing with is the presence of individuals, the presence of vulnerable individuals and quantity, the children, and all the stuff that's going on with that. In a construction zone, it's not just the presence of the vulnerable workers, it's the things that our attorney articulated, and it's probably even in the statutory construct, probably in some of the enabling legislation, it talks about protecting the equipment and protecting drivers from equipment changes in normal flow, even when there is or is not, even when there is not active construction going on. So tonight, like now, if you drive that way, it's still pretty tricky. Maybe, very tricky, whether or not they're off to the side doing something. It's about perceptions. Folks might perceive that the construction zone is about active construction. They don't understand that it's about the overall context that's taking place, not just activity. and may think that the fines are doubled, or that it's not relevant at the moment. That's kind of an education piece.
I think we're trying to do that in our school zones as well. You know, the fines themselves don't double in the school zones, but we're trying to move towards the light indicator systems and that type of stuff, reducing the speed at the times when the students are moving from between properties and not necessarily just behind the fences and that type of stuff, so.
Yeah, I think that perception though is always the same thing, even if it's a school zone or a construction zone. When is it enforced, and like you said, now we're gonna double the fine, and it was 12 o'clock in the middle of the night.
Maybe we need some signs or.
Yeah.
I think at night too, I mean, even though there's no workers present, it's harder to see maybe some of the things on the roadway, so it becomes more hazardous. In the daytime, you have workers out there, your line of sight, you can see further down the road, you can see some of the things. I know for me, my night vision is what it used to be.
When they're dark and wet.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, so it presents a whole different hazard at nighttime, even though workers are out there, so I think.
And again, any suggestions that council members and staff have on these, you know, we certainly have the staff report in here. The goal of this is not to be punitive whatsoever. The goal of this is to make sure that we don't increase the number of calls out there and that type of stuff for accidents, so keep that thing safe, or keep people from not driving into other people's properties because they got the wrong place.
Chief, have you been citing speed violators now that are currently violating the current speed limit during, I mean, we don't have it specifically construction zone, but I do know that speed has always been a problem on E Street.
Every
With
day.
or without construction.
We've had, our tickets have gone up quite a bit, but, yeah, well, we work East Street, and I know we do stuff, for speeding.
And what's the current fine, just for my own curiosity?
Depends, the basic fine for, let's say 10 hours, $124.
Whoa.
And then it goes up incrementally.
Okay,
So construction zone will be just a wee bit more.
yeah.
And mind you, the difference with some of the construction zone ones too, and with the school one is, if I write you a speeding ticket on E Street, you can request a court date and try and plead the case and mitigate that. And the judge may say, okay, your driving record will knock down to 75. With my understanding, the construction of the school
It's gone.
zones is set, so you can't.
That's with option 1. Option 2 and 3 don't keep that in there, if I understand correctly.
Right, there's more discretion for enforcement. Right. In option 2 and 3, if there's actually a presence of construction workers or a clear and present hazard.
Other questions?
Well, yeah, that also begs the question as to whether or not it is possible to have an option 4, which is option number 1 minus the penalty may not be waived, reduced, or suspended.
Is that statutory?
You have to check as far as being cited in the construction zone.
My understanding from the RCW is it doesn't require this type of language, and maybe the WACs, I haven't looked at the WACs yet for this.